Good morning, everyone, and hello from Fraser Coast. My name's Katie Burke, and I'm coming to you via the magic of YouTube. So you can rush home tonight and watch this over and over again, and perhaps even share it on Facebook with all your nerdy friends. So I'm going to be talking about my doctoral research today. I'm only very new into it. I'm about 3 months in now. So it's more conceptual than anything, and looking at how I envisage my own project as re-engineering research for results. Researchers seek results, but what form exactly they take can vary significantly. And when you think of results and results in research, what comes to mind? For some, it might be the stuff we find out as a result of conducting the research. It's written up in the results section of our thesis, where a researcher will report the findings in their study, kind of like a data plus analysis mediated by methodology equals results. And I should point out that as a qualitative researcher with an arts background, you should be suitably impressed by this mathy type illustration here. It's a pretty rare thing. I'm certainly not critical of such a view of research results. I just felt that it wasn't quite enough for what I wanted for this project. I wanted something more, something beyond these results, and here's why. My background as a home educator to these two cherubs for 8 years and a tertiary arts educator for the same period of time has directly contributed to my previous master's research, where I investigated the challenges that Australian home educators faced with regard to facilitating an arts education. It was an action research project, so after I'd collaboratively explored with my participants their experiences regarding arts learning, we then collaboratively explored potential solutions. So I'm continuing this same focus into arts education within Australian home education as a doctoral researcher. As a member of the home ed community, I became aware long ago of the sentiment of mistrust possessed by many home educators to those in authority, and that extends to educational researchers. Whilst educational research into home education, I think, is overtly positive, it's actually one of the reasons I considered getting into home education with my own children all those years ago. However, one of the things I've noticed is that it's not actually any direct benefit to home educators who are currently in the practice. It's felt by some that the benefits go to researchers, universities, experts, attorneys, and others who use it in place of direct knowledge, alternative practices, and effective political action. So my intent as a researcher who's also part of this community was, and it remains, to generate results that facilitate direct knowledge and effective future action for participants and the wider home education community. The kind of understandings that I seek, the kind of results I seek are not actually new understandings, but workable practices that are going to facilitate an improved sense of confidence and competence in home educators delivering a quality arts education. And in conceptualising my project, I've therefore sought to move beyond traditional education research practices and have sought an approach that re-engineers research as an endeavour that both engages in and results in practical beneficial action. And this search has led to the adoption of design-based research. Before I explain that, just a little bit about why design-based research is perhaps conceived a little differently to traditional education research. Most academic research makes it no further than the academic journals in which it's published, with practitioners rarely engaging with these. Translating the findings from published studies into practice is often an insurmountable task, and not just because they're written in inaccessible language. Thomas Reeves, who is one of the head honchos in the design-based research community and who looks spiffy in a bow tie and is often seen wearing them, says it's time we put the public back in publication and that we generated usable research findings with legitimate impact on practice. He sees traditional educational research, especially in the area of educational technology, as often conducting one-off quasi-experimental studies which are not always easily related to practice, or they have inconsequential learning outcomes. So design-based research is therefore focused upon re-engineering the research process to bridge that gap between research and practice. I'll just step you through a brief illustration of the basic process of design-based research. So the researchers adopt the role of both researcher and designer. They collaborate with participants to design and implement focused interventions in response to contextually experienced problems. Kind of like this. Participants identify something in their practice that they see as problematic, and the researcher will work with them to identify that problem more clearly and then collaboratively generate a solution that is going to work for them. Now, if you're thinking this sounds a lot like participatory action research, you'd be right. Design-based research works with participants and stakeholders to identify, develop, implement, and refine workable, contextually relevant solutions to issues that have been identified by the participants themselves. But beyond this, design-based research's unique contribution, and the thing that sets it apart, is the development of design principles as an additional outcome of the research. Principles which may inform future design improvements or developments in contextually related endeavours. I'll discuss this more on the next slide. So after the identification of the problem, and based upon existing theory and existing design principles, and in collaboration with participants, the researcher will generate a design intervention. After that, I will iteratively trial and refine the design intervention, and finally develop resultant theory from the process that should assist future research endeavours in related contexts. So that's the all-important design principles at the end that really sets design research apart. Thomas Reeves has outlined this as a 4-phase process, and this is the process that I will be following for my doctoral research. And you can see it outlined quite clearly there, that in phase 1 we have the problem analysis or the needs analysis, and then the development of design solutions, which in phase 3 are iteratively tested and refined, and finally in phase 4 resulting in documentation and reflection to produce design principles. By now, the appeal of design-based research is hopefully quite evident. In the end, and even in the process of it, the participants should feel like a solution is being developed and then is developed at the end that really meets their needs and improves their practice. And more importantly, that they feel that sense of ownership in its success, that we avoid the knowledge appropriation that sometimes happens with research, where a participant group will offer up a lot of important data that the researcher uses, but then in no way does it transform the participant's experience or the wider community. So if at the end of my project the participants are saying something like this, then I will consider that success. And hopefully at the end of the project, everyone will be left with a smile on their face. In the brief time that I've been engaging with design-based research, I've identified some key concepts which I thought I'd go through now as another way of helping to add layers of meaning to this re-engineering of research. So design-based research is contextual. It's conducted in the real world, where researchers work closely with practitioners in the messiness of real contexts. It challenges the assumption that a researcher's external influence in a real-world research setting is contaminating. The process of design and research are simultaneous, ensuring the design is grounded in research and the research is grounded in and reflective of authentic real-world contexts. It's pragmatic. It has an overt focus on engaging with and improving experienced problems and works to develop, quote, an empirically grounded theory on how the intervention works. That's Gravemeyer and Cobb, 2006. Design-based research is integrative. It makes use of hybrid methodology. It's not a methodology in itself, it's a qualitative approach to the research endeavour that is multidisciplinary. It makes use of both qualitative and quantitative methods to bridge that gap between research and practice. Design-based researchers, you could think of them like bricoleurs, much like the original bricoleurs or tinkerers who employed existing materials in innovative ways. The design-based researcher may employ mixed methods most suited to their research context to discover, explore, confirm, and disseminate a series of approaches with the intent of producing new theories, artefacts, and practices. Educational researchers are being urged to generate researched understandings that are scientific and evidence-based. A credibility gap is sometimes found between educational research that generates that useful, locally applicable knowledge and then research that is scientifically generalizable and credible. So within design-based research, that generation of design principles that may take the usefulness of the research in context beyond that immediate context, that's the element that's focused upon remedying that dilemma, that perceived credibility gap in education research. Design-based research is collaborative. The researcher works with participants who collaboratively work to generate, implement, and refine the design according to their expertise. I really like this part of it. It's socially just. It's an approach to research that affords participants agency and does not appropriate their knowledge for an endeavour that doesn't lead to any benefit, just as I discussed in the previous slide. Finally, I see design-based research as generative, with the ultimate goal of generating useful outcomes for both participants in the form of a workable design and for future researchers in the form of design principles and resultant theory. I'll now spend the remainder of this short presentation just briefly unpacking my own thoughts as to where my project is going. As I said earlier, I'm only in the first 3 months, so this is basically a conceptual overview. Its overriding question is what support can be offered to home educators that will equip them with confidence and competence in facilitating a high-quality arts education. Now, if I were to approach this, which I am, using Reeves' 4 phases, the first phase being needs assessment, this phase of the project has a sub-question, which is what difficulties do home educating parents experience with regard to facilitating an authentic arts education? And the goal of this first phase is to find out how home educators facilitate the arts and determine those problems that they experience. And you can see there, that's actually been already completed via an online forum. I also need to conduct an internet use questionnaire, finding out what access that the home educators have to internet and computing facilities, what skills do they have, and I'll also need to include exploratory usability tests with a prototype intervention. Those kinds of understandings are going to underpin the intervention that I will be running, and that will happen next year. My Phase 2 goal will be to develop and evaluate the design intervention. And I'll be using this question, what support best meets home educating parents' needs in facilitating a quality arts education? Just as a sneak peek into some of the ideas that I'm beginning to form regarding the intervention, I anticipate using Moodle and as an asynchronous collaborative learning platform. It will hopefully provide a library of sorts where I will have a collection of helpful targeted resources for arts education, and in particular how home educators can meet Australian curriculum requirements. Somewhere where families can gain access to helpful arts resources, some form of gallery where they can be sharing their work with others and generating that sense of community. And The centerpiece of this learning platform will be some kind of extensive resources or curriculum materials yet to be written that will focus upon the provision of learning guidelines to help home educators integrate meaningful and high quality arts learning into their education practice. Phase 3, the effectiveness evaluation, will then be the evaluation of the effectiveness of the design intervention in terms of existing design principles, and that's overseen by the question, in what ways and to what extent was the design intervention effective? And then finally, the last phase, the documentation, in which I will need to define the design principles for learning design for home educators or online arts support, and define paths for future research in this field. Obviously, there are no sub-questions here. Perhaps one could be, though, how much sleep does one need to survive when in the final write-up of a PhD? I'll get back to you on that one. Hopefully, this process is going to lead to results. Improved practice for participants and the wider home educating community, reliable, credible, trustworthy research, and of course we can't forget a floppy bonnet at the end of it all. Thank you for listening.